Good morning and welcome. We have a very special webinar here this morning and we're looking forward to presenting this. We have a great special guest, Kim Renshaw, the Director of North American VAR Channel of the North American VAR Channel for Autodesk Incorporated, has joined us today to go over a lot of the advancements in the AEC industry and especially the Autodesk new subscription model. This is an important webinar because there's a lot of things coming up in the coming year that will have an effect on many businesses. I don't feel at all that they will be negative effects, but they are effects that people need to know about so that they don't, inadvertently become negative effects. There's a great deal of positive that will come out of this, but it's very important that you understand what's going on in the licensing models for your business. So Kim has been gracious enough to join us today to present that. What I would like everybody to do, on the panel console, you can hit the orange arrow to get the panel out of the way so you can see your whole screen. Most of you have been on a webinar, so you know this stuff. Would everybody hit the raise your hand button so that we can make sure that people are hearing us? Okay, it looks like the sound's coming through pretty well, so that's always a good thing, because webinars without sound are like a day without sunshine. So with that, I am going to not hog all the time, and I'm going to turn this over to Kim. If you do have questions during the webinar, we will hold the questions in this case to the end of the webinar, but if you do have questions, type them into the question box, and we will have time to get several of them answered at the end. And once again, we appreciate your time. And with that, Kim, you can take the helm here, please.
Well, thank you, Stan, and it's a pleasure to join the CAD-1 team for this webcast today. And as Stan shared, I want to take a little bit of time and talk about some of the technology changes that are taking place and impacting the AEC market. And these are really coming from the market itself. They're not industry trends driven by Autodesk. And then I'd like to transition and talk and share with you about what Autodesk is doing and how we're transitioning to support those business changes. And as we go through this, as Stan shared, share your questions. We have captured a number of questions from many of you that are on this call prior to the webcast, and we'll be answering and addressing many of those here at the end of our time together. So let me just kind of start from a very high level. And if we look historically, technology itself has always brought disruption to how things are made. And when we look where we are today, it's not only changing how things are made, but technology is impacting how things are used, how they're sold, and how they're serviced. And if we look at just three examples that I have here on the screen, medical devices, for example, today are being manufactured and customized for that user, right? So they're not doing a massive runoff. They're one-off manufacturers that really hit a specific need. And a couple of other examples of things that we see on the market today is even Rolls-Royce with their Power by the Hour program. And this is really changing the fundamental business model related to selling jet engines. And the last example, which really kind of ties to AEC, is really Google's Nest product. And, Google's not selling Nest because they want to sell thermostats. Instead, they see Nest as a piece of the connected home and a way to expand their reach. Clearly, technology advancements have the potential to impact a wide range of businesses, including your business. And I really want to tie this a little bit more specifically to AEC. And again, we see disruptive technologies within this market. Physical things are connected to one another, becoming even more deeply interconnected systems. The physical and the digital interconnection creates new opportunities that really bring value to the built asset or to a space. And so I talked briefly about the Nest before, and I want to touch on that again. The Nest thermostat, as an example, learns an occupant's behavior, and it offers better environmental control and energy efficiency. This data-driven insight is really how we use the space and how we scale it up to the environment. And an example I have here on the left is a Midfield Airport building in Dubai. And there they use very sophisticated technology, not just for innovating how they handle baggage, but how they do duty-free item sales, as well as the efficiency of processing the passengers. Now, access to this type of data and feedback from spaces really gives us a way to respond to the demand for high performance across many dimensions. And it starts early. It can impact the building owners, the occupants, the designers, the contractors, as well as those who are producing product that goes into the buildings themselves. You know, it impacts the entire ecosystem, and it's really it's exciting actually to see within this market of how it really extends to the entire team and the collective capabilities within those teams. Now in the future, buildings and these elements will generate a stream of data, and these objects will be the data with which analysis will be used to design and provide better insights to buildings going forward. Now we will understand that through the linkage of how spaces and structures perform in terms of systems, both environmentally, economically, and actually even socially. And we'll be able to have more insight to control that space anytime from any place. And when I talk about controlling the space, right, we're looking at things like energy consumption. You know, how are we building more efficiently? And how are we being responsive to those spaces? You know, really the vision can be as big as we want it to be, but we're seeing the push of technology within the AEC market driving and changing not just how we design buildings, but how they're managed and done and how people live and function within those spaces themselves. Now, when we talk about changes of technology, we also look at an evolution of the technology that is used to actually do the design of things. And from an Autodesk perspective, we really break this into 3 eras. And the first era that we take a look at is one called of documentation. And this is really where the focus was on digitizing existing processes and then managing the data that resulted. Now, it provided efficiencies, but it didn't necessarily fundamentally change the process of how people were working. The second area we talk about is of optimization, and this provided new ways to solve problems that could not be solved effectively with the traditional development and physical prototyping processes that were previously used. Now, this allows companies to increase their capabilities and reduce costs and time to market. So we did start to see an impact on the processes that were being used in the design process. Now, the third era, or really the era we're in today and have been moving into, is one of connection. And this era of connection extends the ability of companies to connect their business processes and collaborate with stakeholders, and to change the way they operate, to transform from a product-only business, even if it was just developing a product as a building, to really to move to an enterprise model where products become platforms for services. And we see this even within the AEC market, where traditional firms are expanding their service offerings beyond just the design and construction of the building. Now, what's really important to realize is that in each one of these eras, it incorporates the era that came before it. You know, it's not as if documentation goes away when a company adopts optimization. And similarly, a company that moves into the era of connection still optimizes products during development. Now, what is changing is that the capabilities you need to compete are ramping up. And that's where Autodesk is looking at how can we help our customers and our clients step up and be as competitive as possible and meet that challenge. Now, when we talked, and I talked briefly about, you know, technology can be disruptive, I wanted to drill into this a little bit more specifically for AEC. And we can kind of break this down into 3 major areas of disruption that are really catalyzing, really kind of setting off for this new era and for the built environment. And these are going to have a big impact to building design as well as construction. And these 3 areas are around production, demand, and the products themselves. So when we really talk about production, I talk about how we think about and deliver buildings, both intellectually and physically. And this is changing. You know, there's a shift in our attitudes about what intellectual property even means. about who contributes to it and who actually owns it. You know, cloud and mobility technology means we can design anywhere, at any time, with anyone that we would choose. Now, when we look at the nature of demand, what I mean by that for AEC is that this is how customers want to interact with their space, how occupants drive what they need in a building, and what we produce in a design, you know, is also evolving. Clients want high-quality projects that benefit from the collaboration across multiple teams finding the best talent and achieve and have an excellent balance between costs, project risks, and rewards. Now, the third component is product. So, of course, by that I mean buildings, the assets as well as the design that we use to construct them. Now, whether that's a piece of equipment, a system, or a whole building, what we see is a huge change in the production and the nature of demand and the definition of products. And this is happening because the digital, again, and the physical worlds are become very deeply intertwined. Now, because disruption is going to kind of move and has moved through each one of these eras, it will continue to move through the era of connection and bring disruption with it. And again, that doesn't always mean it's a negative thing. It brings advancement with it. And there are 4 areas that need to be looked at or should be considered when we look at the disruption taking place, the drive to be more competitive, and the opportunities that brings it with. You know, a couple of things that can be characterized by this era of connection is really access to unlimited processing power. You'll be able to solve more complex problems and, in fact, will require a heavier processing power to be able to address the problems you need to solve for designs going forward. You know, there'll be a seamless connection of talent so that the best ideas can come forward and are considered. And this allows extended teams, regardless where people are geographically located, to come together to get that best solution. It's also going to provide free access to capital by reducing risk, and it will make possible access to alternative sources of financing like crowdfunding. And we see that taking place with select projects today. And the last thing I want to share is that these capabilities are all going to be available to any company, regardless of the size or the type of business or its location. The barriers to access will become very low, meaning all of these components, talent, access to power, new ways of funding into projects will be accessible to all firms, regardless of their size, again, or location. Now, one thing we can look at is as we go through this transition, subscription in itself is becoming a new norm. And this is true in personal lives as well as in the business world. So I wanted to step back and just kind of touch on some things that today have become new nature, where just a few years ago we handled things differently. And again, it's all around getting access to information and data anytime, from any device, from anywhere. So a few simple examples is digital news. You know, you still can have a newspaper delivered to your front door, but more and more people are going online and accessing either through e-readers or from iPads or smartphones the news they want to read from any location at any time. And there's a real convenience to knowing that I can still access the local news going on in my local community, even if I might be on the other side of the world. And it's all by doing it digitally. We also have seen a big shift in magazine subscriptions. So you can still subscribe to a magazine and have the paper magazine delivered to your door, but we're seeing a growing trend where now people are purchasing a subscription that allows them to access multitudes of magazine journals at their fingertips when they need it, when they want to read it, on a multiple of different types of devices. Now, the last example I want to share with you is even just access to movies and entertainment. You know, it used to be that you would decide, well, maybe this Friday night we will rent a movie and watch it at home, and you go to the local brick and mortar store and you're hoping that the DVD that you want has not been sold out that night, so you can rent it. And if it's not available, then you were looking for another type of movie, or you were changing your plans for that evening. Well, today, based on subscription, I never even have to leave the house. I can via subscription, dial in, select the movie I want, begin to download it or stream it, and watch that movie from any location at any time, and many of those boundaries have been removed from before. So let me circle this back about being the new norm. We see it come into play in many of our personal lives and many ways that we work, and we see the convenience and the flexibility that brings. That's no different for the business world either, and that is a move that Autodesk has been making in terms of providing easy and approachable software in terms of cost or in terms of the amount of time that you want to purchase the license for. We want to provide that same type of flexibility so that you can access your design software, collaborate, and work on projects anywhere at any time from a multiple number of devices. So let me move over and just kind of talk about the three different types of subscription offerings Autodesk has today, and then I'd like to spend some time talking about some changes that are coming forward that you should be aware of, and provide some clarity to you so that you know what all your options are, and really see where the advantage could be for you, or you could continue working the way that you do today. So there are three ways I talked about subscription, and one many of you on this call are probably well aware of, and that is where you have and own a permanent license. You receive the media or you downloaded it, and then you have a serial number and a license that allows you to use that software. And then you have that on what we have been calling a maintenance subscription, meaning that you paid an annual fee. You may have been doing it multiple years at a time, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you have that on maintenance so that you get additional benefits, right? You get the most current release when it ships out, and depending on your product, you might gain some additional functionality due to that maintenance contract. You'll also receive some additional benefits like previous use rights, and particularly in AEC, that becomes very important. You're working on a project that might be in a 2015 file format, and even though a new release has come out, you still need to deliver it in that previous release of 2015. The maintenance subscription contract enables you to have access to those older releases of software to deliver the file formats as you need them. Also provides you benefits like a home use license so that you could have access to the software in your office as well as at home. So hopefully that subscription model is not new or foreign to anybody on the call and should be familiar, I would expect, with most of you. Another model that Autodesk has introduced has been what they call their desktop model. And this actually was introduced a couple of years ago. We first started to see adoption within this within our animation and entertainment market, but it's not something new that has just come out this year. And we've been bringing solutions to the forefront via this model, like I said, for a while now. And this really brings a different level of flexibility to our customers. It's much more flexible in its deployment and its usage. And desktop subscription licenses really provide flexibility, enabling you to purchase it either monthly, quarterly, or even on an annual basis. Of course, the most effective is under a multiple year scenario, and again, I'll touch on that here in a few minutes. You know, a great opportunity for this is really for new solutions that come to the market. It allows you a very low-cost entry into access of the software. And a couple of things that I'd like to share with you to make sure folks are clear of is on the desktop subscription license, you download the software to your device, and it actually is tagged to the user versus where a permanent license is tagged to the asset, to the machine that it's downloaded on. So when I talk about flexibility that the desktop subscription provides, it allows the software, since it's tagged to a user. If it was myself, for example, I could load that software on a PC, I could access it from a tablet. I have multiple devices that the same user can access it from, providing you that flexibility of accessing your data, which is stored locally, at any time, from anywhere, from what is a convenient mechanism for me to use. The third way that Autodesk has been providing and leveraging the subscription model is really through cloud subscription. And again, for a few years now, we have been offering solutions brought to market that are exclusively offered under the cloud, where the software is hosted in the cloud and accessed that way, very different than the desktop subscription. And a couple examples of some of our cloud offerings have been our Fusion 360 or A360, for example. So again, Autodesk has looked at moving toward this norm of subscription and providing the flexibility so that as you have projects come up, again, you have access to software now at a lower price cost entry point, particularly underneath our desktop subscription. You can have that power of computing through some of our cloud offerings, but the subscription model has been delivered to our customers, and our solutions have been delivered to our customers in a number of different formats within subscription. Now, what is changing with some things that I wanted to make sure that everybody on this call is aware of, and I'm very confident that CAD-1 is very good at keeping you apprised of all your options, but I wanted to touch on a couple of things. One was the multi-year, and as we move forward, those of you, and I encourage all of you to have your permanent licenses on a maintenance subscription contract. This is the only way that you have to make sure that you have that license and software updated to the newest releases going forward, is to actually maybe leverage a multiple year contract. And what that allows you to do is lock down today's pricing for the next 2 or 3 years, so that you know what your expenditure is going to be projecting out. The smallest time duration you can do a maintenance subscription on is 1 year. And going forward, any of our customers that have permanent licenses on maintenance subscription will be able to renew those maintenance subscriptions for as long as they would like to. Now, that same multi-year option is available in the desktop subscription. So I mentioned about the flexibility of the terms of time that you'd be using your software for under this subscription model. And I talked about you can subscribe to it for a month. You can subscribe to the software for a quarter or for a year, but you could also do it also for a 2 or 3 year term, and again, locking down that current pricing. A couple of upcoming key dates I wanted to share with you and kind of provide some insight as to how our subscription modeling continuing is to develop is on January 31st of 2016, so we're only a few months away. It will be the last opportunity for customers to purchase new permanent seats of most of our individual solutions. So what I mean by that is if you have a seat of AutoCAD 2016 or a license of Revit or Civil 3D, and you would like to have additional permanent licenses available for yourself or within your company, the last opportunity to purchase those will be January 31st. Now, if you have a permanent license today, after this January 31st date, you can continue using that software indefinitely. Now, the key is to have it on a maintenance subscription contract so that you continue to get new updates. If you do not have it on a maintenance contract, then you will have usage of that software in that release you currently have a license for, again, indefinitely. If you don't have it on subscription, again, I really suggest you reach out to CAD-1 just to ensure that you receive those updates going forward. You take advantage of some of the support and the other subscription benefits moving forward, and to ensure that you keep that contract renewed in a timely manner. Now, another date I want to share with you, because I talked about this impacting individual solutions. We also offer products in a suite offering, meaning multiple licenses or multiple solutions are offered under one license. Now, next July 31st of 2016, we will be the last opportunity to purchase new seats of most of our suite solutions. So if you're working on a building design suite in your office today, you can continue to purchase new seats and additional seats of that suite through July 31st. And again, just like with the individual solutions, after July 31st, you can continue using the permanent licenses of the software you have indefinitely. And again, you'll want to ensure that those are on a maintenance contract to ensure that you receive the updates and you always have access to previous releases of the software to support your projects, as well as the home use and the other benefits of subscription. Now, some people might ask, well, why is Autodesk doing this type of change now? Why are you evolving the subscription models and contracts that you've had out there? And as I started this presentation, it was really is to show that we see how the market, the industry is evolving and wanting that access to anytime data from any device, tagged to users, access to powerful calculations via cloud. We're making these changes to support the changes going forward within the market. So with that, I'd like to answer or address some common questions that have surfaced either from myself talking with customers or as you have been talking with CAD-1, and see if we can address some of these and give some more insight or clarity as to what is happening with the licenses you have. And as I shared before, you have some permanent licenses currently. Those are not going to go away. Those will continue indefinitely to be available for you to use, and you will continue as long as you choose to renew that maintenance contract and continue to get updates on those permanent licenses. Now, many will ask if, can I mix permanent licenses with desktop licenses at the same time? And yes, you can. Your office can run and manage through both of those. And we have firms that have been using our permanent licenses as well as leveraging some of our desktop solutions like InfraWorks 360, along with even some of our cloud credits today. So you can have a hybrid work environment. There's no limitations with that. Now, one other thing that comes up frequently is the question is, can people transition their permanent licenses to a different license after the deadline? And you have some limitations with that. So if you have a permanent license, and I'll use an example of AutoCAD 2016, and it is after February, it's February 5th, so it's after our January 31st deadline, and you'd like to transition that, or sometimes we use the word cross-grade. You want to transition that to a seat of Revit, an individual standalone of Revit. That will not be available to you, so you'd want to do that prior to the deadline because the standalone licenses will no longer be available. Now, what you could do with that permanent license of AutoCAD 2016 is before the July 31st date, you could cross-grade that to a suite. So you could take an AutoCAD permanent license and migrate that over to a building design suite, and you would have 6 months to do that after our January deadline. As long as suites are available in the permanent license file, you can do that cross-grade. So come July 31st, after that deadline, though, we're not selling permanent licenses anymore at that time, any new ones. We're still supporting them, but we're not selling new ones. So there would be no cross-grading or transitioning of those licenses at that time. Now, a couple of other questions that come up is, will all of our products eventually go to our desktop model or subscription model? And the answer to that is yes. We have a few select products that will be kept in a permanent license model for about another year or so, and you can work with CAD-1 and we can clarify that if that impacts you or if that's a license you're interested in. But our overall direction is to move all of our technologies to a solution, to a subscription base. One question when we talk about everything moving to a subscription base that comes up is, you know, if I'm working on permanent licenses, should I stock up on licenses, extra ones I need? And that's really a hard question to answer. And it really comes down to every firm is different with different needs. And you really want to look at, if you see growth within your company and you see the need that you would have, say, in the next year for some additional permanent licenses, I would highly recommend you take a look at making those purchases before the deadlines. If you have growth, which I know you all will after our deadlines, we also have ways for you to expand, and that's with that hybrid work environment where you may see a combination of a termed license along with your permanent license. Now, I do get asked as I talk about subscription many times about the perks and benefits of subscription. I've mentioned a few of them as we've been talking here already, but just to highlight probably the most two valuable that we get feedback from customers on is obviously the current update, so you always know you have access to the most current software. Now, we realize not everybody deploys and runs on the most current release as soon as it becomes available to you. You're wrapping up projects and your office might be going through a transition. Some firms still may choose to select, right, time periods of when they do that transition of software. So you still have the flexibility then of the previous use, and that becomes very valuable to customers. So current updates and previous use are probably the two most popular in terms of the perks and benefits of subscription. It still allows you access to home use licenses. There's some support access in there, and depending on the products that you have licenses for, could also provide you with some additional functionality as well as cloud credits. So please work with CAD-1 if you're not clear on all the benefits that subscription would bring with you, but you make sure you review those and you're taking full advantage of all of them. Now, one other question that comes up is, you know, if I'm working on a desktop subscription license, does that mean I need to be connected to the internet all the time? And the answer to that is no. I talked about this before, but I'd like to re-emphasize this, that as you work with a desktop license, you load the software to your local devices, and your assets, your data is stored on your local devices. So you need access to the internet to initially download your software and initiate your license, and then you have a 30-day period where you do not need to be connected to the internet and be fully functional with your software. Every 30 days, you'll want to log onto the internet and reactivate and validate your license. You'll get a warning, a message in your software about 7 days before that due date to remind you, log on, get access to the internet, validate the license, and then you're good to go for another 30 days. So you do not need to have constant internet access to leverage a desktop subscription license. Now, I have two recommendations I'd like to make for those of you on our webcast today. And it really ties back to every firm is different. You have different needs from your clients, what they're asking for. Trends within the market impact different businesses differently and at different pace. Some of you might be feeling some of those trends and have clients who are making those kind of requests today. Some of you may not be quite seeing that yet, but you need to be aware that it soon will become the norm. And so my recommendation is that you set up a meeting with CAD-1 to really review your business specifics. And this includes things like what's your expected growth, how do you deploy your licenses, how do you want to continue to use them, and they can help you work through what the best strategy is to keep your office accessing the information and the data the way that you want to. Right? So that might include purchasing some additional permanent licenses. That might be understanding how to run a hybrid environment so that you know what the expectation is and you can deploy that in your time frame. Now, one other thing I would recommend to you is that when you set up that meeting with CAD-1, that you also ensure that all the stakeholders in your company are part of that meeting. Now, what do I mean by that? It's not that everybody in your office needs to attend that meeting, but if you're listening to this webcast and you're not responsible, for example, of the deployment or the management of the licenses, you'll want to make sure that when you meet with CAD-1, that someone who is responsible for that is part of that meeting. So their concerns and questions can be addressed, and we can make sure, CAD-1 can make sure their needs are being met. If you're not familiar with how your company funds the purchasing of licenses, meaning whether they leverage OpEx or CapEx for software investments, you'll want to have somebody within your company who has that perspective on the investment part of that meeting, because depending how you want to fund software could help decide how you purchase, which subscription model you go under. If you maintain your maintenance subscription, or if you want to take advantage of the desktop subscription model. So with that, Stan, I'm going to bring you back, and what I'd like to do is see if some additional questions have come in from those on the webcast that you would like to ask, because I think we might have a little bit of time left where we can answer a few more questions.
Yeah, Kim, thank you very much. We do have a couple, 3 questions. One of the things that that we've noticed here at CAD-1 and that we're looking forward to, you mentioned the previous use, and I think that's very important. Now, there has been some back and forth with previous use with the permanent licenses on maintenance subscription. You had 3 versions back. There's been some back and forth with desktop subscription. Is that 3 versions back or 2 versions back?
We can, yeah, so I'll tell you what, let's take that offline. I know for sure it's 2, and the thing that I'd like for us to check, and then you can follow up with your customers, is in the rare instances where somebody, even under their perpetual maintenance subscription, has needed an older release, we can provide them an exception to their user license to have access to that. So let's capture that question and be able to follow back up with your customers then, confirming the time frame, and then also confirming if exceptions will still be allowed going forward, which I expect, but let's confirm it if they even need something older than what the normal policy will allow for.
That's a good one, and I appreciate that, because that's going to be very important to people. Now, one of the things that we look forward to here at CAD-1 is that, and I don't know exactly how long it will be, but I would say over the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, as people progress forward in projects that are done on older versions and new projects are started that are on the current version of the software, we'll see a kind of a one platform, one version sort of program here, and I think that will make life a lot easier for everyone, where they won't be near as much having to save backwards or have 2 or 3 versions on your machine. So that'll be a good time to come down the road a little bit. We do have a couple questions popping up here, Kim, and Michael, you've got a great question about Maya and so forth. It's pretty specific to your environment. I know Michael pretty well. It's pretty specific to your environment, so I'm going to get that to Denny and Jennifer and get you a specific answer to yours, but we'll get that answered for you. Emmett asks, how does the cost of 1 year of Revit on the permanent licensing compare with the new term licensing? And I will say, Emmett, that first off, the permanent licensing is permanent licensing plus maintenance subscription versus the term licensing. So, Kim, do you want to take a crack of that, or I can help you?
Sure. So one, for specific dollars, for a comparison of how it lays out for your situation, I would definitely get with CAD-1. When we look at the pricing, you want to take into account the initial investment that was made with that permanent license, and then the ongoing maintenance cost to that. When you look at the desktop, it has a much lower entry price. So where someone may have been spending $5,000 or $6,000 or more, depending if they had a suite or not, for a permanent license, you'll see a much lower cost of entry. And I'll kind of use some ballpark numbers, kind of doing this off the top of my head. I'll use an example with AutoCAD. So a permanent AutoCAD license, we don't sell it or quote the prices directly. You're somewhere around, $4,000 to $5,000, for a permanent license. If I went to a desktop subscription for a 1 year engagement, I'm looking at like around $1,000, a little over that, to go into that. So one of the things that the desktop subscription brings is a lower cost of entry, right, versus the higher upfront cost that you were looking at with your permanent license. And then it will have a slightly higher ongoing price, but again, the lower entry upfront, and your permanent had a higher investment upfront and has a lower annual maintenance costs. And again, in both of those scenarios, I recommend a multi-year so you can lock down your price. Just like with any other business or anything else that comes across our paths, Autodesk is not any different. And if we look backwards, you can see over a period of time there will be price increases. That's kind of a nature for everything, right? Whether it's food, the clothing we buy, or the software we buy. So if you want to lock in your pricing, that's where you can leverage that multi-year. So permanent has a higher upfront cost and a little bit lower maintenance ongoing cost. Desktop subscriptions have a much lower entry cost, and that stays pretty much flat across as you renew those multi-years. And again, unless you use if you use it for multiple years, unless you do a multi-year contract and lock that down in price. So CAD-1 could sit down with you and show you there's, the specific pricing to it, but hopefully that was helpful to at least lay out for you the differences between the two models and the two factors, initial cost as well as the maintenance costs you want to take into account. Was that helpful, Stan?
Yeah, I think it was. And Emma, I can, Kim and Autodesk are not able to do this, but I can give you a rough figure, and I'm just going to because all the pricing is more or less proportional, give or take a little bit, but let's say you went with a building design suite premium. The list price on that's about $6,800. The maintenance on it annually currently is about $1,000, a little over $1,000. If you went with the subscription, the desktop subscription for that, it's roughly a little under $3,000. So you can kind of use that as a gauge. Most of the products are in that proportional range, so hopefully that gives you things. Emma, yeah, let's meet soon. We got a couple other questions here that Desi has one that we'll take offline as well. Jean asks, will LM Tools still be used for checking out a new network license, or is the license checking through the Autodesk site? And basically,
go ahead.
You understand that one, Kim? I'm sure
you
do, but
enough to be able to answer. And I was starting to kind of chuckle a little bit, because I have been with Autodesk now a little over 15 years. And when I joined Autodesk, I was an application engineer, and I probably could have answered that. But it has been a while since I have been that technical. So on that particular question, we'll either Stan, if your team can follow up with him, or we can collectively take a look at it. I don't want to give misinformation. It's a great question, but it's a little more technical than I am good to answer off the top of my head.
Well, Jean's a good friend of ours, so we'll, Jean, I'll work with Denny and Jennifer, and we'll get back with you on some of these questions. Jim, I'm going to tell you I saw Bentley at the DBI show. I have an acquaintance at the Bentley booth, and they're moving to subscription at the same time. So to answer your question, it is the industry trend. We will be, there's a question, will we be able to prorate our subscriptions for desktop products and add an existing contract?
Great question. And so we don't have the specifics released yet on how to do that. I can tell you they are working on that. We realize how important and what a value it is, right, to be able to prorate when you add additional fees so that the customers are managing one contract, right? It makes their life a lot easier to manage their software. So stay tuned. We should have details on how that can be handled within this desktop subscription model. But we are looking at that because we know that's a high value and important feature for the customers.
And then the desktop subscription is a standalone product. Will there be a subscription option for term-based network contract? And Kim, I know you kind of touched on some of these during the webinar, but it's good to hear the answers again.
Yeah, so I heard a couple of questions maybe in that question. So let me kind of repeat back so I can do my best to answer them. what I heard also was if somebody's on network, will they be able to add licenses potentially after the deadline? Is that?
I know where you're going with this, and yes, I think both are very relevant questions.
Okay, and then I think part of the other question was suites under desktop, correct?
Well, and then will there be a network version of the desktop as well? So you actually kind of got three questions there.
Okay. Well, no, that's good because I want to do my best to get folks the information they're looking for. So let me take each one of those. So on our desktop solutions, and again, as we continue to provide more information about the features and the flexibility within them, you will see that in the future, let's see, how can I answer this? I don't know if we'll use the term network or not, but I understand what people are looking for, right? How do I get the flexibility out of my desktop license as I do out of my permanent network? And so I don't have details to give you today other than we understand, right? That's the whole point of the connectivity and having flexibility within your licensing to be able to access not just your data when you need it, but even the solutions and the applications even from multiple devices. So I talked about how desktop is tied to a user that allows me to put it on multiple devices. That's different than the permanent that's tied to a device, right, that people can log in and use. So stay tuned on additional flexibility. Again, it may not be called a network. I don't know how it will be termed, but I know the question people are seeking is how can they expand their flexibility within desktop? So with that one, I need to say stay tuned as we'll continue to release and bring more options and functionality within that desktop to meet that need. One of the other questions kind of in there we kind of touched on, Stan, was if you are a customer who has permanent licenses on a network today, right, what are your options going forward after our deadlines? And Autodesk will be working to provide you an opportunity to add licenses to your networks. They will not be additional permanent licenses, but they will be a termed license that can integrate into your network. So again, stay tuned for more details to follow on that, but I believe we will have a solution in terms of that type of flexibility that's being asked about. And I believe the third question was, are we going to see, desktop with suites? And as I shared, we are looking to bring all of our solutions deliverable underneath that subscription model. So stay tuned. I think we will continue to have offerings. Our key is not to limit, right, what technology you're accessing, but allow you to access what you need. And so it may not be called an actual suite. I'm not sure what term we'll use to it, but stay tuned because all of our solutions, again, will be coming out underneath a pure subscription model that I talked about earlier. So I think I touched on all three of those, Stan. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yep. I think you did. Desiree has a question here that I think kind of ties in with this. Since the desktop subscriptions are user-specific, does that mean only that user can use the license? So if they don't need it 1 week or month, say they're out of the office or something, and another user does need it, will the second user have to purchase their own desktop subscription while the first one goes unused? And I think this gets back to the clarity on the network situation of desktop subscription.
Well, I'm glad you asked this question because her example, right, probably brings a great example, specific example to talk about. So today, the desktop subscription licenses are tied to a user. So it is based per user. Stay tuned as we will continue to bring more functionality to that desktop to give you that functionality I think you're looking for, right? Flexibility within the office. So I don't have specifics on that, but as I know, CAD-1 keeps you all very up to date as soon as we release updates or enhancements to licenses, and I'm sure they'll be able to circle back with you as soon as we have more details on that. So watch for that to come. We understand, right, the flexibility you're looking for, within that network license. And, you know, if currently, again, it's tied to a user. So if that person is out of the office, not using it, it isn't by the licensing agreement available for someone else. But stay tuned for future functionality within that I think will address what you're looking to do.
And Desi, we're going to be out at your place tomorrow, so I can talk to you a little bit more about that to address, you know, your second kind of question, comment down the line there. And again, this is why it's important that we come out and have a meeting with you if you have these types of questions. We're going to have and Anthony, you've got a good question there, so I'll get to it in just a sec. We are going to have a follow-up webinar with Kim in early January to keep you posted on the developments here, and then we may even go forward and have one after the 1st of February at some point when all of these appointments that Kim is talking about are actually in place. So stay tuned, but we'll be happy to meet with you and guide you through this. Anthony asked, and I think it's an interesting question. So if the software is tied to the user, the desktop subscription software is tied to the user, and that user leaves the company, what you know, where do the chips fall?
Oh, that is a great question, and I'll tell you, we will want to let's take that and let me circle back with you, Stan, because I don't know the answer to that one readily available. So I'll need to check on that one for you. So that's a great question to have raised, and we'll circle back, and then we can also add that into our webcast in January to make sure everybody gets that information.
Yeah, and I got to think that there's going to be I hope that there's a way that if the company buys it, the company keeps it. But we'll get that answered. That's a good one.
Well, can I touch on something that you just said, Stan? I think this is really important, you know, for our customers to understand it. You know, our goal is to provide, you know, access to the software, make it as cost-effective, you know, and accessible as possible. We're really not looking to hinder how you work. We're looking to provide, right, the structure that supports how our customers work. And you know, you said something earlier about, you know, we may see 3 or 4 years down the road, right, where all the projects are on the same platform or the same release, which would be great. But I also want to tag on to that it's really the market that drives that. I don't, you know, looking back at our history with here at Autodesk, I can't think of a time where, you know, we have told the customer, right, if they owned a license, and like I said with previous shoots, even when we said, you know, you could go 3 releases back, when they have come to us and said, listen, we need to go 5 releases back to a project. You know, I've seen many times where we've provided that because we're here to support the customers, right? And so I want to share many of the shifts that also come at a pace that the market is driving. So it's an interesting time because technology is moving fast, and it's not necessarily driven or we're the ones making it go fast. Many times we're working to just stay with it so that, as I shared earlier, the customers can be competitive and make the changes they need to. So, sorry, I just wanted to share that.
Oh, no,
did you have another question there?
Well, we've got a couple more here, but we're coming down to the end of the time frame, so we'll try and get them answered. And we always, with our webinars, if we don't get them answered, we will pass them on to our installation support people or someone else that's appropriate into the company and get you some answers. There's several on here that are very good questions. Let's see. What about the subscription user using multiple machines, like a travel laptop or a home desktop? And Kim, with that, you might, if you would, touch on, say, you know, someone who has to travel to not just across the country, but maybe they have to go to, you know, Brazil or China for a bit.
Right, right.
How does desktop affect some of those things?
Great question, and this is a place where I think desktop really shines, right? So underneath your permanent license, right, you had a time period where that license could be taken out of the country, like on a laptop for a project, and then be brought back in and if you were going to be out for a longer duration period, we had processes where you could get the proper approvals, right? So everything stayed in compliance with your user license agreement. So, you know, we provided access to allow people to do that. The desktop subscription, you know, provides even more flexibility without even needing to ask for it. Since it is tied to user, again, you could put it on your laptop. It could be loaded on your desktop back in the office. You could have it loaded, you know, on a machine at home. And since it's tied to the user, you have that flexibility of whichever device you want to be working with to be able to access your license with. The permanent license, since it was tied to a device, right, really you got into a challenge other than for home use. You could only have that installed on one machine, right? One machine in the office and one machine at home. So it was much more limiting. The desktop subscription provides you the flexibility you're looking in terms of accessing software, and it's loaded on each one of those devices, but because it's tied to the user, it gives you that flexibility of wherever you're at. You're in the office, you're working on your desktop. You're at home, you might be working on the business laptop, or you might be working on your own desktop. You're on the road traveling, you're working off of your laptop. It becomes a non-issue because it's tied to the user. And the same parameters for if you leave the country. And Stan, let's take a note. Let's make sure we add that into our follow-up webcast in January and talk a little bit more on, you know, if you're traveling outside your country, what does that mean with the desktop, since I know we're short on time.
And what we'll do, Kim, we'll keep a list of these questions, and then we'll, you know, as Autodesk progress on various issues around this and how they solve some of the things technically and business-wise and otherwise, we'll retouch on these questions over the next webinar and so forth. Everybody, we are short on time. I will tell you that this has been, or it is being recorded, and we will post it to our CAD-1 YouTube page probably within a week. You know, it's just a matter of getting it done, pulling it down, processing it, and then posting it. So we'll have that available. Stay tuned. We really appreciate everybody who joined. We had a huge webinar today. Shows how important this is. Please, please call us with these questions. We can provide a few more answers for you personally than we can over the webinar. But thank you very much for joining us. And Kim and the Autodesk staff, Nathalie and Heidi, and the CAD-1 staff, Lawrence and Denny, thank you for all your hard work to put this together. And so we appreciate it, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye now.